I was processing this through the lens of what Satan has done to Christians through even the storyline of Christ and where Jesus is in the coming or the not coming or the coming back or the not coming back and all of that. And I won't go into my kind of revelation connected to that because that's a whole other can of worms. But if we know Satan as the accuser, as the liar, that is literally what he's doing on a consistent basis. Is he is trying to make Jesus appear as the liar. And if Jesus is a liar, then everything we stand on from a Christian faith is also a lie. And so if Jesus's promises don't come to fruition in your life, and the enemy is constantly telling you, see, I told you he wouldn't do that. See, I told you you're not good enough. See, I told you you're not this. And this is literally how the enemy will combat our own children. So it all parallels together. I just think Satan's a big gaslighter. And so if we can figure out how to stop the gaslighting problem on all sense of narcissism, manipulation, all of that, especially in our own lives, man, we've got extra weapons and tools that we need to armor up the church with specifically, because I think there's a lot of gaslighting happening inside the church, which is destructive.
So we have been meeting as a collective in what we call the table every single Wednesday for the entire year, actually. The Lord really dropped it in my spirit when I had my mastermind space open. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have all this free time. What am I going to do? And God said, gather my people. And so for an entire year, we've been gathering faith-based entrepreneurs, a room full of strangers that come together week by week, who some of which have become family, others drop in time to time as that like distant cousin. But when they come to the table, it's this place of safe haven. It's a place of communion. It's a place of just connecting over the real and the raw of what's going on. What's going on in the climate of the world, what's going on in the climate of our world, of our minds, of our hearts, of our spirits, of our business ecosystems, and everything else that's happening as a becoming leader, right? None of us have figured it out. We're all on the journey. And so everyone has a voice at the table. And over the course of this year, we have had so many people come in who they want to be there every single week. They just don't have the capability, whether their schedule or whatever it is. And they're unable to be there, and they want a recording. They want to listen. And I'm like, no, like this is a sanctuary. I initially was pretty steadfast. I had no hearing from the Lord that I was supposed to release it any other way, that this was supposed to be a safe space. And about 8.5 months in, the Lord said, you can share now. And it was a conversation that I brought to the table because it's not mine to share. It's not Anthony's to share. It's a sacred space. And the conversations are getting richer and richer and richer because the presence dwells when we gather in this way. We know when 2 or more are gathered, there he will be. And he has always been. There's been prophetic understanding. There's been worship. There's been devout prayer. There's been healing that's happened. There's been storytelling. There's been testimony sharing. There's been, lens of how do we get by with understanding of obedience, with understanding of discipline, with understanding of the good stuff, right? The rich stuff, the fruit bearing things that we get to experience on this side of heaven. So when we decided we're going to start recording, I was just going to do it once a month. And I brought it to the table and everyone was like, no, I want every single recording is so good. How are you going to decipher when something's going to happen or when someone's going to say something that you just really fully need? So we now have a recorded sanctuary. And for those who know us as a mobilized church, this is not news because whenever people listen to virtual churches, they get to hear from the pastor every single week. But the variability on hearing the table is that it's not just the pastors, it's not just the minister, it's not just the people who we're bringing in for an episode. It's a collective, it's the whole body. And it's from people all over, from all different walks of life, from all different entrepreneurial backgrounds, and all different elements and spaces in their faith journey too. And it's beautiful. It's so rich. And I really believe that you guys are going to get a behind the scenes. And this is an invitation. This is not a BTS. You don't have to stay behind the scenes. This is an invitation for you to come and dwell with us at the table. And so I hope that this ignites you enough to say, you know what? I want in on that conversation. And your voice will be heard too. But most importantly, your heart will be brought into the union of all of us together. And that togetherness is something that entrepreneurs often experience the opposite of, which is isolation. So no more isolation in our journeys of entrepreneurial mission-driven leadership, and no more isolation in our spiritual journeys. This is a time for us to truly commune and for everyone to get the microphone, which is different than the regular church, but it is a mobilized church. And it's the way that Jesus hung out with the people that he loved. And so the people that he was teaching, right? So we're here to teach, we're here to learn, we're here to talk, but we're also here to listen. Tune in to the Founder Collective table, and know you can go to the show notes below and get the invitation to come week by week. It's 12 o'clock Eastern on Wednesdays. We love you. Thanks for joining us at the table.
What's up, Tom? Tamra? How's
Hey,
it going? Fantastic. I'm actually getting ready to go to my little kiddos. They're doing a marketplace today at their school. And so they're already little entrepreneurs, but they had to make their own product and they're selling it today with Monopoly money, which my son just cannot stand. He's like, why can't it be for real money? He doesn't understand. So I'm excited to see them put their little hearts to work. My son he made a book that teaches jujitsu moves, and it's called How to Save Your, get it, Life, and ultimately ends up teaching sorry, I got AI people coming in, teaching them that not only can they learn these moves, and him and my husband did like pictures and stuff throughout the deck of the book, and also at the end of the day, prayer always works. Prayer always works, and they're already victorious in Christ. And then my daughter, homemade ice cream, homemade whipped cream. Very different, two little kiddos, but it's super fun.
that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. Tom, you just celebrated a birthday? Yes? No?
No birthday here. No. Oh, that was my son. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for asking. Yeah, my oldest just turned 17.
Oh gosh, that's so crazy, right?
Which I'm only 25, so I don't know how that's possible, right?
Not at all possible. I do feel
I
like
was
that. You know how like
25
our
with a
family,
5-year-old.
yeah, that's what he said. I do feel like the older I get, and then the older they get, the younger there's like an age gap that closes. Like my mom
Right.
is 60 and I'm 38. When I hang out with her, I'm like, there's no age gap here, right? And when people say, the whole, oh, it was like yesterday until my son or daughter, who is 10 and 11, will say, that was in the olden days, mama. I'm like, come on.
Right.
Not true. So 17. Tom, how many other kids do you have?
I have three, so 17, 14, and 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
2 boys and a girl, or?
Yeah, boy, girl, boy.
Okay. So cool.
Yeah.
And Tamara, what's the age of your kiddos?
26 and 24 and 23. Well, 24 is
Oh, so
married
close.
by 23. So
Okay, amazing. Man, that's a whole nother season I haven't gotten my head around yet.
it is a season. Raising adult children far different than raising littles.
Yep.
And if I could go back to the littles, I don't know if I would, but man, yeah, this is a stage. It's interesting.
My mom said we broke her
I
heart a
think
lot when we were that
right
age.
now, yes. Yeah, I think I pray more now than I did then. It's crazy, but also
Monica,
very
how about you?
fun.
Do you have kiddos too?
Yeah, I have a 22-year-old son. My daughter's 28, and my grandson is 6.
Oh, fun. Grandbabies. Tamara, did you say you had any grandbabies yet?
No grandbabies yet, but we are
Okay.
hopeful in the next couple years because my son just got
Awesome.
married in November, so
Okay, so fairly
they've
new
got other
still.
priorities right now, but yeah.
Have you guys heard of Mark Batterson's book, The Circle Maker? It's a
Yes.
fantastic read. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. But he also has The Circle Maker for a bunch of different little topics. And I'm currently reading The Circle Maker for praying circles over your children. And it teaches
Mm.
you like
Mm.
specific methodologies of scripture to pray over them regardless of age. And I just, we know, especially when you read scripture, scripture to be able to pray over them, and their different character points and things. But times when someone else is instructing you how to pray for your kids, just like the Stormy, I can't think of her last name, Stormy's how to the power of a praying husband. What is it, Tamra? Did you say the last name?
Stormy and Martin.
Oh yeah, that's it.
Martin.
That's it. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Power of a praying husband or power of a praying wife. Like, I'm like, I would have never even thought to pray for that. And just thinking about them through the lens of totality of scripture and not just how we see them. Man, it's been challenging and awesome because feel like I have more weapons for them as they get older. And I want to be better at it, even though I pray for them all the time, but more. How have you guys been instilling your entrepreneurial, blood into your kids in a unique ways?
Well, I don't know that I instilled it, but God did. But my children, my son and my daughter-in-law, are actually getting ready to launch a business.
Awesome.
They just acquired funds this week, and I can't go into a lot of detail yet because that's for them to announce, but I am so proud of them.
That's
They
awesome.
are really doing this thing, and they've got a dream, and it's a really cool dream, and it's all God led, and God has opened doors this week that no man can shut. So we're just praying
Wow.
that his grace continues to flow over this business, and the doors continue to open for them. We're super excited for them. So I don't know that I did it, but I know that God planted it in them, so we're excited.
Oh, so cool. That's awesome. I can't wait to hear what it is. Anybody else? Is that like something you've done intentionally, or it's rubbed off, or maybe not at all? And they're like, you are crazy. I don't want to have anything to do with that. Give me my 9 to 5. And that's okay
My
too.
daughter is totally like that. My daughter is like, "You're crazy. What are you doing? Like, it's never gonna work." And my son, from a very young age, has been entrepreneurial. From like, gosh, probably all the way back to like elementary school. He started like an online store and was selling stuff online. And
Cool.
now he's like, okay, he's like, I want to have land and I want to have goats so I can sell products made from goat milk and things like
Wow.
be able
Cool.
to completely sustain himself on the land without having to work just from what he can sell from the land.
Wow. That's awesome. That's a whole nother level of entrepreneurship, I think. I don't even know what you call
I
that.
don't think he realizes we used to live on like a small cattle ranch, and
Cool.
he doesn't remember that. He was really little, and so he doesn't remember having to
Wow.
get up and feed the animals and, fight off the mountain lions when they came on the property and keep track of the critters when there's bears around. He doesn't remember the hard parts of it.
Geez. Well, he'll find out quickly, I imagine. How about for you, Tom?
Well, they're younger, but what's on my mind is real proud of them for service work.
Mm,
They've been doing just a ton of things around the church and everything. I've got to listen in for a few minutes too. So,
no
but
worries. That's so cool. I think the service work element is something that we haven't really done a ton of as parents, and I don't know if that's because we had a home church for many years, and then when we were a part of another church they were so tiny. They see me and my husband like um, do children's ministry and things like that, and they'll go help with the little kiddos. But I think like communally, I think there would be some really cool initiatives that we could be a part of, that we just haven't really. We'll do like clean the bay day, and we've done feeding the homeless at one point, which they remember very profoundly because it was kind of their first awareness of like, oh my gosh, there actually are people sleeping on the streets here in our city, because it's not very prominent where we are. But I do think that there's a whole character development side of it, not necessarily being entrepreneurial, but it does lead to like the missional element of what we do as entrepreneurs, right? We want time freedom, we want financial freedom because we want to be able to give back and serve, and be present in our communities and things like that. But I'd love to hear if anybody else is instilling things like that or has experienced things like that. Specifically for those who just jumped in, we were talking about um, our kids in whatever capacity they are in, young to older. How has the entrepreneurial seed been planted in their heart? And then now we're also kind of going to service, which I think is really cool.
I'll
Hey,
share.
Jen.
Hey, it's so good to see your guys' faces.
I know.
So what we have a large homeless community in and around where we live. It is very prominent. And so it's something that we see on a daily basis. And what my kiddos have done is they will bake things at the house and sell them to family and friends or bring them to church or whatever. And then they'll take that money and go and we'll make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, or they'll help us make cookies that say, you know, you're worthy and you have value, and or like just whatever that they can bring together. Or they'll scour the coupons and see, you know, what's cheap that I can buy a lot of that's be healthy and helpful. And we'll go out and we'll just say hey to people and bring them water and just let them know that they're seen. And then we have a lot of like Phoenix Rescue Mission and Salvation Army resources in the area. And so we'll give them like little cards with that information on it if they want it. Otherwise, it's, hey, just to let you know, like, we see you. We love you. If you guys need more help, here's where you can go. And, if we see you around and you need something, if we can help, we will. Let us know. And it's really just acknowledging them and who they are, and that sometimes they don't want to change what they're doing. A lot of times they don't, but that we're still going to love them even if they're making choices that are different from us.
That's so good. And I've had an opportunity to be blessed by at least one of your kiddos, and she is just such a doll. So I love that. There's that just that gentle and quiet spirit that the word talks about, right? And it's just indicative of who Christ is in us. Christina, I know you've got a clan full of kiddos. Have you guys, they've seen you and your husband kind of erect this Sweet Dreams Lavender kind of initiative. What is their thought on entrepreneurship or service work?
So the hardest thing for us was when they got to be adults and they had their own ideas of what a career was, and we had no idea how to help them. They both are very creative, so they went into creative fields. One wanted to be a director and a producer, and we said, well, you have to have money to do that. And so we were trying to support him in that dream, but also not put limiting beliefs in his mind that he couldn't do it. And so he's actually very successful now. He became a editor because in college he realized that people don't want to edit their own things, and so there's like some money there. So he gets to work from home and support his family, and it's a wonderful thing. But the other one wants to be an actor, and that's also something I don't understand how to help him. But he is just a creative spirit in LA, and there's a lot of homelessness there that he sees on a daily basis. And both boys have had a heart for the industries that they're in, right? And so as an actor, it's all about what you can perform, what you can produce on your own. No one's going to help you, and it's a lot of rejection. And so my husband and I have been trying to help them from an entrepreneurship lens. I think it helps for us to be able to teach them that, yes, you have to promote yourself, but in a way that is kind to others. So like in the acting world, my son is around a lot of international students and actors. And so he has had a heart now for them because some of them are being sent home. And so there's a whole nother level of, not only are they being uprooted from their home, but now they're having to go back. and so they're not able to follow their dreams and their career. And so we're trying to pivot him into that, like how does that become his ministry, because he has such a heart for them, to keep them here and to be able to make a living and a job that they love. So I don't know if that answered your question. It was a lot of rambling.
No, it's super interesting. And you're right. I think I tagged on to like the self-promotion piece, in, of course, the way that the Lord has given us the opportunity to promote through our callings and our gifts. But also like when you're that age and you don't really know exactly where they're meant to go, but you see God stirring on their heart in a specific way, to be a good steward as someone who is guiding. And this goes to leadership too. So even if you don't have kids and you're listening to this, it's like, man, there are people, we should be always looking at the model of who are we spiritually mothering or fathering in this time, but to have that perspective on, hey, this is really stirring your heart. There might be something here that God is leading you into, because there's a lot of people around those people who don't have a heart for it. And so somebody has to stand up and somebody has to start speaking up. I'd be curious though, because that is such an interesting on time element, Christina, about the deploying people back to, I don't know if deploying is the word that they would use, kicking
Right.
people out is really what's happening.
Yeah.
Has anybody else been affected by that, whether in their business or family or anything? I'm so curious. I mean, I know there's a small group here today, but we have with my son in the Brazilian jiu-jitsu community, people who will come over to like on short-term work visas to through from Brazil. And so I'd be curious if they're having any of those issues. I hadn't thought about that in a while, actually.
Yeah, I think it's okay when they're in school, but once they get out of school, there's a very
Yeah.
short time to find a job. And in the acting
Yeah.
world, you don't get a job right out of college. It's
No.
all very ad hoc and
Yeah.
by
A little bit
chance.
at a
And so,
time. Yeah. And I
mhm.
think even if they have a job, I think people are still deploying and leaving.
Yep, yep.
So interestingly, all of this conversation, I was literally just coming on and telling people what I was doing, which is on my way to my kiddos' entrepreneurial market that they're having at school today, which is so fun.
Ah,
But I've also been in First and Second Samuel, and we binge watched. My husband and I had an unexpected sleepover for the kiddos that happened with my sister-in-law, and so we had an unexpected night of binge watching the new David. Have you guys seen? Anybody seen the series yet? Holy smokes. Jennifer and Christina are saying, yes, you have to watch. Yes, Tom's seen it. Oh my gosh, it's so good. There's only 8 episodes, so we were able to get through a majority of them in a 2 day time span. But um, after we were going through that, and I was like, wow, gosh, is this in the Word? And we kept pausing, and I kept looking things up because I've read through the Bible multiple times, front to back, and you can get the concept at large, but are you reading the details? And so, wondering if these names are all in there. Did I miss something? Is this conversation been happening? Obviously, just like The Chosen, they're putting in their own kind of narrative and experience as well. But then I wanted to go directly to the Word, and just I was like, I'm going to start at the beginning. I'm going to start when Eli took Samuel in when he was little, and Hannah, because even Samuel mentions my mom. People thought my mom was crazy until I came along, and it was because Hannah was the wailing woman who year by year was just, I'm barren, I'm barren, I'm barren. And so thinking through the mothering experience there, but then also thinking through Eli's experience with his two sons. And there's this one particular part, and I don't have the answer. So if somebody knows it, let me know. Anthony would be a great person to kind of investigate for us. But there's a moment where Eli's sons are essentially telling people that they don't want the sacrifice to be boiled fast. They want them to roast it, but they only generally roasted sacrifices on Passover. And so they were essentially doing it wrong, and it was not of the law of Moses to do this. And so people were starting to be like, what's wrong with these greedy sons? If you follow Eli's son stories, they do a lot of other things, promiscuous and not of good child rearing. And their whole household, Eli's whole household, including his sons and a generation to follow, end up losing essentially the anointing because of these children. And I process that for ourselves. Like, man, Eli kind of turned a blind eye to his other kids, and he really did pour into Samuel. But is that because Samuel's gifts were like, something they could recognize, or something that he could see, or that he heard from God? I'm not really sure, but I know every child, especially from my own experience as a sibling, all three of me and my brother and sister are totally different. We all have different gifts. My parents had to parent us all very differently, and we all went awry at some point. We all went prodigal. And so, man, imagine if our prodigal season affected the anointing of our parents. And that's possible. Now, obviously, the blood of the Lamb changes all of that. Jesus is here, and that doesn't necessarily have to be our story. But yeah, I just think it's so interesting when we're living something in the natural. The spiritual is also always trying to communicate. God is always trying to communicate something in our hearts. Also, does anybody have a revelation around generational passes? Did you hear my question?
No, I was going to say,
Oh, I was asking if anybody has any insight into child rearing, generational passage of anointing or not anointing, or something like kind of breaking in your home because of things that have transpired in your family.
yeah, I think that, I recently also was studying that same passage of Samuel, and we were discussing the generational sin. And the thing that struck me that I think is real interesting is that what is a burden to my generation, let's say alcoholism or something like that, it becomes if I turn a blind eye to that, then it continues to go through the generations. And God had to say
Yeah.
no because he had to wipe out that whole line of thought. And that generational sin does pass from, whether we think of it or not, or whether we know it or not, it does come in until we choose to say, no, I'm going to align with the Lord. And I just find it real interesting that, as those generational sins pass through the family, they become normal. So like, and I have this, so, I didn't know what gaslighting was. I was on doing a study, or uh, a class, and that topic came up, and then you realize, oh my goodness, I've been gaslighted my whole life. That was like my mother's parenting model, and now I gaslight myself. It's those voices inside. And then I realized that even in my parenting that I brought forward, I had to reverse that path for my kids, and it's just like sarcasm. Sarcasm becomes normal, but sarcasm's very hurtful. And it's just those things that we accept as normal within the family line, and then it just gets passed down, the sins of the father. So that's a pretty big topic point for me right now, is just thinking back on that and how I continue to pour into the next generation so that my grandchildren won't suffer with those same things.
That's so good, Lori. I, interestingly enough, was having a conversation with a friend recently about, it wasn't necessarily about gaslighting, but I had a dream about the conversation, and it was between Satan and Jesus. And that Satan was essentially gaslighting Jesus to Christians. And this was literally my dream. Okay. And I've had a lot of experience with gaslighting as well, and what that actually looks like. And if, for those who don't know the definition, you can look up the precise definition. Maybe somebody has Chat GPT open and they can give us a little feedback point. But ultimately, it's a form of manipulation where the person wants to point fingers at somebody else. And if you think of like literally starting a lighter in your hand, and they have a problem, they have an issue, they have something that is accusatory towards them, and they don't want to take ownership. Instead of lighting up their own life, they take the lighter and they point it and flash that light towards somebody else. Now, that other person may or may not have anything to do with that situation, generally not. But it causes a distraction to everyone else around them. So no longer are people looking at them, they're looking at where the light actually is. And they're literally allowing somebody else's life to go up in flames because they don't want their own situation to be uncovered or discovered. So I was processing this through the lens of what Satan has done to Christians through even the storyline of Christ and where Jesus is in the coming or the not coming or the coming back or the not coming back and all of that. And I won't go into my kind of revelation connected to that because that's a whole other can of worms. But if we know Satan as the accuser, as the liar, that is literally what he's doing on a consistent basis. Is he is trying to make Jesus appear as the liar. And if Jesus is a liar, then everything we stand on from a Christian faith is also a lie. And so if Jesus's promises don't come to fruition in your life, and the enemy is constantly telling you, see, I told you he wouldn't do that. See, I told you you're not good enough. See, I told you you're not this. And this is literally how the enemy will combat our own children. So it all parallels together. I just think Satan's a big gaslighter. And so if we can figure out how to stop the gaslighting problem on all sense of narcissism, manipulation, all of that, especially in our own lives, man, we've got extra weapons and tools that we need to armor up the church with specifically, because I think there's a lot of gaslighting happening inside the church, which is destructive.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. And, and then the other thing is, even in the garden, Satan was, did he really say you would die? And so
Totally.
You're just making that up. You heard that wrong, and so, yeah, it's definitely, yeah, if we could mend that one, I think we would have a
Yeah.
armor.
We'd be back in Eden, y'all. We'd be back in Eden. That would be fantastic. I love it. Generational passes are a massive conversation. And I love, Lori, that you brought up something that to most people would seem simplistic, like sarcasm, but how deep rooted that can actually affect and trigger and propel any human into another negative response, right? Whether that negative response is self-preservation, whether they hide, whether I'm going to air quote this because I think all of us are extroverted or introverted, but they're a diagnosed introvert, melancholy, and they don't like to be in public or be seen. And those things will literally progress and progress. I know people who have fear, literally planted fear from things like flying airplanes, driving cars, going on roller coasters because their parents were petrified of it. And my mom did the very opposite with one particular area, which is actually public speaking. She was petrified of public speaking. And so she thrust me and my kiddos, my sisters, not my kiddos, my kiddos weren't born, thrust us onto what is like called the hearth of a fireplace, where you stand up on that little pedestal. And she would make us public speak since we were very, very young. And so I've had a microphone in my hand since age 4. And I remember people coming over for dinner for gatherings, and my parents would be like, okay, the kids are going to perform. And we were like, what? No. And sure enough, we would have to perform. And you would think that that would be like a negative thing, but it's been such a blessing to my life. And so when my mom was at TEDx last week, it was so cool to just see her her tear-stained cheeks of just like being so proud, not only of the message, because it's something she lived out herself, but also like watching that generational pass. So it goes both ways, but I love the element of understanding that sarcasm, and specifically what I would love to bring up, unless somebody else has another one that they too want to add into the conversation, is our money stories are so linked to our familial money stories. And I don't know if people have done the work of like tracing back your money story and understanding why you have a problem asking for money, why you have a problem making a certain threshold of money, why you feel uncomfortable if a dollar sign is a certain amount and you're like, oh, no, that's just, I can't do that. I can't afford that. Or you can't set your own pricing as an entrepreneur beyond a certain number because that's just too expensive. And yet everybody else, when you do your comps in the industry, is like 10 times as high as you. So I'd love to just like open that can of worms as well, because I think it's so correlated to everything we've talked about. And how are we instilling the money stories of our children now, no matter what age they are?
Well, I'll share a story. So my grandparents moved here from France after World War II, and they were able to they could each bring a trunk of things from France, and that's all they were allowed to bring onto the boat. And my grandmother actually worked in the finance industry in France before they came here. But after they got here, my grandfather was very distrustful of any kind of finance. He didn't trust banks. He never, like, he didn't get a credit card until he was like in his 70s, and it was because they had to have it to set up they lived way out in the boondocks, and he had to get satellite TV, and so he had to get a credit card in his 70s to be able to watch the news. And my grandmother, when I was 8, she got hurt at work, and she wasn't ever able to go back to work. She got permanent disability. And my grandfather opened an account, and he would deposit those checks in there, and they never spent it, because he was like, no, they're going to come back after us for that money and make us pay, they'll make us pay all that back. And he like hid money all over his house, and he buried money on his property. And so I grew up hearing that. I grew up with my grandparents. They were, they lived in the same town as me until I was 8, and then they moved an hour away. And the same with my other grandparents. It was very much like my grandmother was never going to spend money on anything, and my grandfather was like, I worked hard and I want to buy nice things. And so he would spend money on things, and then I would see them fight about it. And my parents, it was never like, my mom didn't handle the finances at all. She just never, it was always, and there was always fighting about the finances, because she would go write checks and constantly was spending money and buying things. And so I saw a lot of different things growing up around money, like my entire life. And I still now, like, now that I've started doing work on it, I can look back and I can say, well, my mom's spending habits were linked to her mental health issues, and that she never chose to address that. So we can watch her spending habits. Me and my sister can watch her spending habits and know where her mental health is based on those spending habits. So I've really like had to go back and look at like, okay, how do I spend money, and what did I teach my kids about that? And since I joined the mastermind a year ago, I was like, that was really like one of the first times that I had spent money on myself. And, really like the last 2 years is the first time I've ever really spent money on myself. It's always been, no, we have to save it. We have to be careful. My husband became disabled over 20 years ago, so we've only lived on one income. And I had to really be like, okay, we made it through all of those hard times where he couldn't work and it was just me working, and we've never been homeless, and it's always been there. And I have to trust that the money is going to be there, and that I can do these things to take care of myself and live the purpose that God put in front of me. And I don't have to worry that the money's not going to be there.
That's so good. I think that element of worry tied into money in general, that's where that poverty mentality comes into play. And I wonder, where is the link for people who walk through that, myself included? Where is their spiritual bondage connected to the financial bondage point? Because ultimately that's what it is. And so I would say worry is probably part of that. Trust is probably a huge part of that. Faith is probably a part of that. Stewardship is probably a part of that. Lack of knowledge, because lack of knowledge, without it, we'll all perish, right? And so it's like for your mom, she never handled money, so she could spend whatever she wanted, whether she had a mental health thing or not. I was that way a lot for a very long time in my marriage. And so I just did it because it seemed like everything was fine, right? Everything was good to go. And I was never red flagged otherwise. And so processing those different pieces, it's been something that's been an evolution as me being an entrepreneur, bringing in our own finances, and then also what it looks like as a couple. I don't know if you guys know this stat, but with our sacrificial love book that just came out, it is one of the top 3 reasons that people get divorced. One of them is finances. And so I find that it's not only something that we should talk about and learn about, I should say, but it's also something we should talk about. And I think as entrepreneurs, we can talk about, oh, how do you price that? And how do you do that? But then it's like, there is so much more to what happens to that dollar than just how you price something and then it comes into your business. How are your taxes being paid? Are you set up to pay quarterly employee taxes? Like all these pieces that are honestly new revelation points for me, even though I've been an entrepreneur for nearly 2 decades and we've always paid quarterly taxes and we've always put our dollar in different places. But I don't think that money has ever worked for me. I think I've always worked for money. And in this next era of my life, I am not going to do that anymore. Money's going to work for me. It's a resource. It's
Right.
not a bondage point, right? And I think that's a way that I personally was raised. Like you worked for money, you worked to buy a present, you
You worked
worked to
hard.
so hard. And if you weren't working hard, then you weren't doing enough. And
And you
therefore your
just
enoughness and your
weren't working
worthiness are
hard.
now connected, right? Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or you didn't have enough education and you weren't doing something in that regard, or you've made the
Yeah.
wrong move. And so I love that you're sharing this. I see my sister jumped on, which is fun. Lisa, we were talking all about lots of different things, but parental, generational, gaslighting, all these things. And so I was sharing a bit about our family in that regard. But Elisa has walked through lots of different financial experiences in her own life, also from our, natural home front. But it's cool to see her in a whole different space. The dollar signs connected to zeros are just more, but it doesn't mean that this money story doesn't change, right? You have
Right.
to change
Well, and
that for you.
something I found that was it took me a while to realize this, but talking about like you have to work hard for money. If you're not working hard and you're not doing these things and you're not going up the corporate ladder, you didn't earn the money, so you won't get it. And you don't deserve it because you didn't do this. And so I had to really sit back when I was starting to look at pricing for my business. And because I was like, well, why would somebody pay me that? Like, I haven't been doing this for years and years and years. Why would someone be willing to pay that? But it was because I didn't value my own worth because of those stories that I had grown up with. And so I had to do a lot of work around, like, this is, I've learned this stuff over my lifetime, and I didn't go to school to learn all of it. A lot of it was from my life, and it's different than somebody who goes to school to be a doctor or a lawyer. And this is all, it's still education, even though it's not a PhD.
School of hard knocks.
And
That's the real thing.
still that still provides value, and that's still, people are still going to be willing to pay for that knowledge. Even though I don't have an MD or a PhD behind my name, people are still going to be willing to pay for the knowledge that I have and that it is worth something.
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Christine, I'll share after.
I was just going to add that it's not only how much you make, but how you use what you make. So I know over entrepreneurship time in my own business, I've exceeded what I've made. And so that also creates the bondage that we were talking about. I think you have to be good stewards on the other side of it too. Even if you're making money, it's not an endless amount of money. So I'm guilty of overspending and wanting the pretty shiny things, and my husband's like, what are you doing? You know, like
Yeah.
so
That's so good. I just had this conversation with my husband. We were reading through Proverbs 27 yesterday on the 27th, actually. And I said, what's your lens on the concept of the Joneses? And I didn't want to put words in his mouth, and I didn't want to say, and this is what I think your relationship is like with the Joneses. But and who, if you ever know any Joneses, you need to change their name, just change them. But I don't know any Joneses. So he was like, I don't think that I have, any, I don't know. I just think the Joneses are the Joneses, and we're who we are, and good for them and good for us. And when you wanted to say 1,000 things, you just gotta bite your tongue because you're like, that's nice. And you're like, I'll pray for you. I don't know if that's true or not for you, babe, but I'm just gonna let you have your perception here for the moment. And he's like, why? What do you think? And so then I'm sharing my lens, and I was like, I think social media has a big play in it. I think zip code has a huge play in it. I think that there's so many things that are at play on comparison in our lives that we don't ever think about. And pace is a part of it. But it's also, he goes into these like multiple $1 million homes every single day. And to say that there's no influence on that towards something that you possess or don't possess, or you're watching people spend this amount of money and you don't have that amount of money to spend, I think your buying habits can be like weakened, and you can be weakened in your steadfastness or your boundaries or things like that. And so I just think it's a constant conversation. Again, you can avoid it all day long, or you can gaslight and put that light on somebody else and let nobody thinks about you, nobody's thinking about you at all, but you have something going on. And so just being really cognizant of that when it comes to how we are stewarding our money and what that looks like from a generational past point as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. My grandfathers were both contractors in Aspen. And so, I grew up around, the housing and the people and the celebrities and seeing all of that. And it's really strange because so there's this bridge that you have to go across to get into town, and it's like crossing into a whole nother world. And so you go from like the normal everyday people who live in the next town down, and you cross the bridge and you get into town.
Yes.
Everything is very different. And so growing up with that and seeing like, having that influence of people that could just come in and spend money and had all of this money, um and the influence of that, I've like, it's interesting now when I look back at that, and and I see people in my family that were very influenced by that and very much like, oh, I have to outdo the Joneses. And I'm like, the Joneses over here are worth $20 billion. You're not going to outdo them. And then I would see, I would see trouble where they would try to do that, and they would just like write checks until they had no checks left in their checkbook, and they'd bounced all kinds of checks and things like that. And so yeah, really, but it took a long time for me to really learn. I never learned how to handle money growing up. My dad was in charge of the finances and never shared that, never, you don't talk about that. And so now it's taken a long time for me to, we made a ton of financial mistakes, and now having to recover from those and learn and be like, okay, how do we steward this money in a responsible way, and how do we teach our adult kids now how to do that and continue doing that. So it's a weird dynamic.
It really is. I saw Tom come off camera. I wasn't sure if he wanted to share on it.
I got a couple thoughts about finances and what not to do.
Let's hear. That's good. We need those too.
So I'll keep it brief, but 47 years old and 30 years of construction. And I have a financial issue all of my life. I find it kind of interesting that some of us have to learn the hard way, but I grew up in a trailer with my family. and we had a lot of great times. Powdered milk, didn't enjoy it, but I grew up drinking powdered milk and secondhand clothes and everything else. And so I look back at that, and we had a joyful upbringing. We had a great setup, but it was a very tiny trailer. My bedroom was like 2 feet by 6 feet. That was the extent of my bedroom. And so, anyhow, through all that, and then 30 years of construction and chasing a lot of earthly things, I'm amazed at how much finances are tied to spirituality and my walk with God. And so there was a time about 9 years ago that, because of a few apartment buildings and restaurants, I could have and probably should have retired. But I kept plowing forward, working 80 hours a week because I needed more, I needed more, and I needed more. And that ended up tying in a lot with my alcohol and substance abuse, and of course, pride and everything else that came from cars and boats and things like that, to where now a lot of that nest egg is completely gone. And I am almost starting over, so to speak. Um, but I've been listening in the whole time. And I think teaching our kids finances and entrepreneurship is so important. But I think the ultimate thing I'm trying to do with my kids now is really talk a lot about the heart and what is God directing us to do with our short lifespan that we have. Life is but a vapor. And some people, you know what? They are designed, God has a plan for them, and it is 50 grand a year. And other people, it is 500 grand a year. And praise God for them, because we need employers, we need people to finance our churches and our schools and all of that. But there's also a threshold, especially with men, of when does pride kick in? When does I am somebody, I'm successful, look at me and my 17 cars and my 2 boats and my indoor pool and my 6 acres, looking at the mountains. And I've lived it. I've been there. At 39 years old, I got a check from an apartment building we sold. And believe me, I did not think I was prideful, but it went right to my head, and it was a disaster. And so just financial conversations are always something I enjoy, because I want to be more and more convicted, or challenged, I should say, to make sure that as I am working and chasing opportunities, that I don't. Here's something that somebody told me recently. They said, if something brings you closer to God, it's a great thing. But if it takes you further away, and sometimes with men that I work with, uh, when they do get a certain extra cushion, they get a bonus, they get a promotion. Now their daily disciplines and church attendance and their devotions with God, their devotions with their family starts to go a little bit like, I'm good. God, prosperity, God's so good. And I look at that, and then I look at the life of the disciples, and I'm like, where does it say that the disciples all of a sudden had a mansion and had 10 cars? I don't think
Yeah.
anywhere. I think they literally
Yeah.
gave up everything. They followed Jesus, then they were martyred for the call, for the sake
Yeah.
of. So it's just a lot of spirituality tied in with finances, and nothing wrong with money, but the love of money, and even the love of recognition, like I'm an employee, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a business owner. That can, a lot of times, I'm speaking, of course, as a man, can't speak for ladies, but I think for all of us, finances and success are so tied into how our walk with God is. So I'm working
Yeah.
on it. I'm
It's so
learning, and
good.
I hope to keep learning and challenging myself more. That sometimes in life, less stuff. And a guy told me once, I'll finish with this, is he said, Tom, a lot of things in life are nice. Cars and stuff, there's nothing wrong with them. A lot of things are nice. A lot of things are not necessary. And so what's
Mm.
necessary? Air, food, shelter, God. So
Clothing, or you might get arrested.
yeah, that too. But keep going. I am listening in here and taking the
It's so
kids
good though.
to see my mom here, but love these
Thank
discussions.
you. Yeah, I so
Thank you.
appreciate your candidness. And I think that every one of us were shaking our heads at one point of the mistakes and the choices. And I 100% concur with the financial and spiritual connectivity. And that doesn't mean that someone with a lot of money is spiritually mature or spiritually well, just so you guys are very clear on that. Because sometimes that is Satan's lure, as it was, as Tom exampled, it was a lure for him to get out of alignment and to please his flesh rather than pleasing God. However, people who do make a lot of money, who also are spiritually mature and do have a power and of leaning into stewardship, man, can they bless the kingdom in some profound ways. And so I think all of us can raise our hand and our heart to say that's the desire of our heart, is to, regardless of how much, whether it's the 50 or it's the 500,000, that we will be stewards for God and vessels for the Lord. And so doing what we have with the little to be able to do that on a maximized scale. Elise, I don't know if Tom ended up jumping in on what you were going to share, but you raised your hand at one point.
Oh, well, now it's like it's so beautiful the way you weave everybody's little tidbits and what they're talking about into a nice, beautiful, seamless like little summary. So it's so good. Yeah, and I loved what Tom shared. I followed along with that well, and then the other gal, I did not get her name, but it's all such great information. When I think about business, is something about I heard, I think Tom say, I just heard like the blip, chase the money. It may have been I'm going to take it out of context a little bit from what he was talking about, but I think that we're constantly, those of us who are like aware of ourselves and where we are in our journey and such, that you challenge yourself to take a look at your intentions, where you are in life, what you are doing, why you're doing it, right? And we may not always be present and aware every single day, but a bigger picture, right? So the word and the phrase "chase the money" is something that has constantly come up in our conversations with employees and with people in our company and in our industry. Because it's really easy. I think a lot of people want to make a lot of money, right? They want to do well. They want to do well for many reasons, right? All for your family, for yourself, for generations, and whatever it may be. But a lot of people actually, when you get down to actually talking about the root of why they're doing what they're doing, sometimes they are just doing it simply to make a lot of money, and that's like the goal, right? But we try to actually, my husband's so good at doing this, at really picking apart like this idea that you may have, and challenging our employees and people that we know close to us. If they start to kind of, it sounds like you're chasing the money, and we actually will call it out and be like, okay, what is your intention? Are you chasing money? Right. And it may be with an actual like customer or a deal or whatever it is with your goals for the year, right? Like we're a sales company, but we also do a lot of other stuff. And so if you're just looking to chase the money in the sense of I'm chasing whatever is bright and shiny out there, the customer who has the most amount of money to spend, and I'm just doing it just because I want to make a lot of money, or I just want to get ahead, or whatever it may be. Like we challenge people to get to the heart of, don't look at it that way. The money will come. So so instead of chase the money will come if you are doing the right things, right? So if you keep putting in the work, you keep putting in the effort, you keep showing up every day. Those are all the things that will eventually get you to that money. And that's kind of like the philosophy of our company, and you just keep pushing and the money will come, the right things will come around. But I don't know. I don't even feel like I'm not even on.
You are. We're
Oh,
here. You're
yeah,
here.
yeah.
Good. Okay. It's so weird.
Like, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
It's really good.
Cool.
Christina, did you want to affirm or share
Yeah.
something?
So I'm hearing a theme with everyone that's shared is, there's almost a reset of your heart when it comes to the posture with money. I know for me, not having money actually made me want it, right? Like growing up without it, like Tom said, makes you want to have that life that everyone else is portraying or that you didn't have. And that's, that's a heart issue, right? And then you pass that down to your kids, and then they just want to take from the hard work that you've put in because you were so driven to have this life that you wanted them to have that you didn't have. And so I guess I just wanted to kind of sum up everybody's what I heard from everybody, and that's just, resetting our heart back to God and what he wants to do with our money, because it's his. And I know we've talked about this on the call before, right? Like, are we doing the things that he's called us to do? Are we tithing? Are we giving back to him? Are we serving others? And when we do that, then when we do get money, then it becomes something that we have to steward well. And it's not easy. Trust me, like, we came back from Virginia Beach and we went right to the spreadsheet again. We're like, all right, this is not easy as a family, not easy as a couple, but what are we going to do next? Like, how are we going to position our family so that we can take care of some of these things that we want to do? Especially with adult children, some of you know, travel is all the time. And so how do we position those things that are important to us and set those goals again? Because I think it's a constant check-in with your spouse on what are the things that we're doing and what's most important. There's always something that breaks around the house that you need, like, what are we prioritizing right now? So, but I think it's just a beautiful story when you can do that together. I'm kind of the control freak, so I do all of that. And so to let him in is a posture of me accepting the help and recognizing that we're sharing that journey together. So putting the ugly on the paper and facing it is something that I've had to continue to do, just to kind of check in with myself and make sure that I'm still aligned. I'm still doing the things that he's calling me to do. So I don't know if that helps.
Love that language, putting the ugly on the paper. Like, you just do. If it's not there, it's not seen. If it's not seen, it's avoided. If it's avoided, it's not going away. And it just is compounding, right? And so that's great language for it. And the flavor, the saying of like souls over sales, right? Souls over sales from an entrepreneurial lens is like, literally, we're here to do kingdom work, and you can easily just put like a seal of like a cross on your business and say, I'm a Christian company because we believe in God. But that doesn't mean that you're doing godly work. That doesn't mean that you're serving God through the work that he has asked you to do. And I also don't believe that, because we obviously, for founder lens, it's like marketplace ministry could be faith founded. It doesn't have to be faith forward. You don't have to be preaching the gospel, but your life should be preaching a gospel every single day. And there should say, why are they different? And then you can get into the intimacy of like, let me tell you why I'm different. And I think our money is no different. And when I talk about having our money work for us, is really through the conversation, like you were saying, Christina, not only of savings, like what is the savings account that has the highest interest rate on it or accrual rate on it, so that I have that being maximized, but also conversations like real estate, investing in that regard. I want my money to work for me, not the other way around. And that's how it should be working. And also the knowledge point that we shouldn't be gambling in the way in which we're using money. I don't know if many of you guys probably know Candace Still. She's like super avid against the stocks in the stock market. And everyone has their different opinion on that. But at the end of the day, there's an element of gambling to it that you cannot deny. And so it's like, man, is that the thing that I want to invest my money in? Even though there might be this great reward, there might be this great crash, right? And so what does that look like as something that's steady, right? And so processing through, what's the steady growth look like? And that's something that even for our kiddos, like processing with them now. I just had a conversation with someone about an IUL this week. We don't think it's the right time or the right thing for them specifically, but is that something that we should be investing in? But more so importantly about all of this is the financial literacy connected to how we're going to be training up the next generations. And I share very much in what you were saying, Christina and Tom. My parents were very not well-to-do and they were young. And so it was very easy for them to jump into, I want to give my kids a better life. And a part of that ended up being credit, right? And living off of credit. And that not being supportive either, because there's no literacy to the credit if you're getting credit wrong. Credit isn't bad if it's working for you, right? We get to fly around the world because of credit. However, that doesn't mean that you just get to abuse it in the process. Go ahead, Lise.
Oh, well, it's so crazy. So like, and you may have known that. So I'm Tamra's sister, right? So you may have known that they were living off of credit. I don't think I ever knew. And so
Right.
like, I don't know if I was just like living this world, like, oh, military, military wives. I mean, mom worked really hard. So
She did.
I mean, they
Multiple
always
businesses,
had
yeah.
multiple jobs and that kind of stuff. So to their credit, for credit, like they also worked their booties
Worked
off
very hard.
and they,
Yes.
for the most part, paid off that credit until like later years, I think it caught up to them. Right. But so, yeah, like as an adult becoming an adult, and then I started my own cycle of that. And also in the living in the world and not having faith guiding anything. Yeah, scrambling. But what's interesting is as a parent of adult children, I'm still trying to figure out how to help them understand that, because now I used to be a single mom, not any money and all the things, and now I'm in a different place in life where they are getting a lot of things paid for, but it's just a struggle. It's a struggle all around, like no matter where you are. But I've had some incredible people. I will tell you, like the backbone. I will honor them in saying like the kind of people that they are, as far as their finances and stuff, or like think of like I don't backbone of America, manufacturers, stay-at-home wife who is a homeschooler, machinists, like people who work with their hands. Like I think that they are one of the most valuable and richest people in America, because they actually understand finances so much more. When you don't have a lot, you understand finances and you know how to make it work. And so coming from the city, so again, the zip codes, like you're talking about, Tamra, coming from the city and coming out to rural Virginia, I have learned a completely different side of life as far as finances are concerned. Now, on the other flip side, not to say that rural Virginia is poorer than Virginia Beach, because in actuality, a lot of the people out here, they own everything.
Right.
They're not on credit. Like it's, and so, keeping up with the Joneses is like keeping up with the farmers. Like the farmers, they got loads of cash. Like they're the richest people in the world, So all that to say, like, yeah, I think for me personally, I have been like on this wild journey of unlearning and learning, and just like my viewpoint on all sorts of different topics have been all over the place, because I've experienced so many different aspects of life, and then so many different people, conversing with different people and understanding, and then also along with my spiritual journey. So I don't know where my point of that was, but I was jumping in on like what you were talking about, mom and dad, and how, that aspect of finances.
Well, and I think if you were to analyze a farmer, Elisa, their money is working for them. Their land produces money. Their animals produce money. Like everything is an output, even though it's a really heavy input. It produces for itself, meaning even if it's not something that they're not selling the eggs, but they're eating the eggs. It's still producing for them what would cost them money. And so they had to invest first for there to be an output.
Yeah, but some of these farmers have been farmers for generations. And so like, the money's working for them, but at the same time, there's this whole tax game. There's whole like credit game. There's all this stuff that like
So good.
most people do not understand. It's like
I
I got to take a
agree.
course in farming. It's
Yeah,
wild
I
the
agree.
how the money works in that world.
So one of the things we're really passionate about when we're in the curriculum build out of the Founder Academy, which is the other arm of Founder Collective that will come out and it'll start trickling out next year, and then it'll officially launch in 2027, is conversations like this, not only like tracing your money story from a simplicity perspective, and understanding what that even means, but also the valuation, but more so importantly is like the investing, the tax strategies. And so that is something that I just don't hear people talking about. I'm sure there's podcasts all about it. If you want to listen to that, I don't want them to be like, wah, wah, wah. Like it to me used to sound like a Charlie Brown teacher until I started to listen to Dave Ramsey, because I had a reason to listen to Dave Ramsey. And then I was like, this is gold. I need to listen to him every day. Right. And so there's a Dave Ramsey for Kids course that my kiddos are going to start taking. So just knowing that there's resources out there, but it's kind of like the red car that you just bought and you didn't know every other person had a red car until you bought it and now you see it. It's like you don't know. And when Tom went through that issue and he's like, oh my gosh, I'm in a drought right here, I just blew everything. The amount of people who have that testimony is every other person. But the problem is nobody talks about it. And so how do we now have conversations about it, one as preventative but also as prescriptive for other people, so that that doesn't happen again? And we're excited to bring things like that to the market for people to have kingdom strategy and perspective, and it to be legal, because that's also very important to me. So you guys, I'm going to jump into the market for my kiddos. I'm so excited. They've got a welcoming committee outside. Go see what they all put together. But let me pray for us before we go. And I hope that this blessed you, even to know that you're not alone wherever you are in your financial journey. But more so importantly, to remember first, just like we talked about with Eli and Samuel and his sons, it's a spiritual conversation, less a financial conversation. So seek and you will find, knock and the door will be answered to you. God has every kingdom strategy you need when it comes to your finances. I am learning this in the real time, every single minute of every single day right now. So I'm walking it out with you, and I'm excited to be able to testify alongside each and every one of you. God, we thank you so much that you are in the midst, God, that we come to conversations like this with no agenda and no intention, and yet you are here to just prompt our hearts into conversation with our brothers and sisters, to be able to be seen by each other, to be able to pour into one another, to learn from one another, God, that you put us into community, you put us at the table, your table, God, in order for us to be able to sharpen one another and to ultimately point back to you. Yes, our testimonies are profound, and ultimately to know that it's you, it's as the through line, that gold lining, God. You are the rich one. You are the one in which we pursue. And it's not for money's sake, God, but instead for provision. As our protector and our provider, God, you give us all the things that Tom mentioned. You give us the air that we breathe. You give us the food that we eat, God. And you literally provide all of our needs. And so for us to not look beyond those, not to look to the Joneses, but bless the Joneses, God. I pray that they continue to use their money wisely and not just to hoard. And anyone in that regard, God, that we would be those examples. We would be servant leaders, and we would start first in the understanding that there are scriptures that literally say we are slaves of Christ. And so when I think about that, and I think about what it looks like to make a wage as a slave, God, it's ultimately your love, what we're pursuing. And so we pursue you hard, God. We pursue you every single minute of every single day. We ask that you would bring people of wisdom and great stature, like King Solomon was, who understood finances in an entirely new way because of resources, because of relationships. You would bring those people into our lives to educate us, to teach us, to raise us up. And most importantly, God, for us to be able to pass your goodness, your kindness, and your kingdom strategy when it comes to finances to the generations that follow. As spiritual mothers, as actual mothers and fathers, God, that you would give us that understanding and we would be able to pass it so that the generation to follow and the generation after them and the generation after them, God, can have a different money story than the money story we potentially have had thus far. We love you. We trust you. We thank you. And we praise you. In your mighty, precious name, Jesus. Amen.